Welcome back to Panda's Nightmares. Tonight, I've got something special for you, 5 spine-chilling spooky stories that will keep you up at night. These tales range from eerie encounters to unexplainable events, each one more terrifying than the last. So, turn off the lights, settle in, and get ready to feel the chills creep up your spine. Before we begin, I want to share something close to my heart. I'm raising funds for my dad's medical treatment, and your support means everything to me. If you'd like to help, the GoFundMe link is in the description below. Thank you so much for being here. Now, let's dive into the darkness together. Story 1. The Lantern Cellar. The sign was crudely etched into a rotting piece of driftwood. Light your path to joy. Lanterns for sale. A skeletal hand drawn in faded chalk pointed toward a cobblestone alley shrouded in mist. I had just finished my shift at the factory, a dreary, suffocating place where the air was heavy with the stench of oil and regret. The alley, dark and inviting, seemed to mock the monotony of my life. Against better judgment, I followed the jagged cobblestones. At the end of the path stood a hunched figure wrapped in tattered, coal-black robes. Their face was obscured by the shadow of a hood, and their gnarled fingers held a single lantern glowing faintly with an otherworldly green light, looking for illumination. The voice was raspy, like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "What are you selling?" I asked, already uneasy. "Hope," they whispered. "Hope in a lantern. Take it, and your burdens will burn away." I laughed nervously, but something in the glow captivated me. The lantern was small, barely the size of my hand, but its light pulsed like a beating heart. Against my better judgment, I asked, "How much?" The figure chuckled, a sound like bones grinding together. "No cost, you'll pay." In time, I hesitated, but curiosity overcame reason. I took the lantern, its warmth spreading through my palm. The figure dissolved into the mist, leaving behind only the echo of their sinister laugh. When I got home, the lantern's glow filled my dim apartment. I placed it on the kitchen counter and stared into its eerie light. It whispered to me not in words, but in feelings. It promised me peace, joy, and freedom. But that night, my dreams twisted into nightmares. I saw shadowy figures in every corner, their hollow eyes fixed on me. Whispers crawled along my skin like insects. The light feeds, the light takes. The next morning, I woke to find the lantern glowing brighter. But something was wrong. My reflection in the bathroom mirror was gaunt, my skin pallid. My eyes, once brown, now shimmered faintly green. Days passed, and the lantern's glow intensified. It spread across the apartment, casting unnatural shadows that writhed like living things. My neighbors disappeared one by one, their apartments left unlocked and eerily quiet. The whispers grew louder. "Feed the light. Feed it, or it will take you." Terrified, I tried to throw the lantern away, but it always reappeared, sitting on the counter, its light pulsing faster, hungrier. My body weakened, my mind fractured. One night, as the lantern's glow began to consume the walls, I heard a knock at the door. The hooded figure stood there, their grin visible even in the darkness. "You've fed it well," they rasped, "but it craves more." "What do you want from me?" I screamed, backing away. The lantern's light exploded, engulfing the room. I felt myself dissolve, every thought, every memory, every shred of my identity pulled into its glow. When the light faded, the apartment was empty. The lantern sat silently on the counter, its glow dimmed, waiting for the next poor soul to pick it up. Somewhere, in the misty alleys of the city, a new sign appeared. "Light your path to joy. Lanterns for sale." Story 2. The Hollow Ones. I don't know when you'll find this, but I can tell you when it started. It was a brisk autumn afternoon, and I'd decided to take a walk in the woods near my house. The air smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the sun was low, casting long, skeletal shadows across the trail. That's when I saw them. At first, I thought they were just people, a group, standing silently a few hundred feet off the path, half hidden by trees. But as I drew closer, I realized they weren't people at all. Their forms were wrong, like crude imitations of human shapes. They stood unnaturally still, with elongated limbs and heads that tilted too far to the side, as if they'd forgotten how to hold them upright. Their skin, or what passed for it, was as pale as bone, stretched thin over their towering frames. But it was their faces that stopped me cold. Or rather, the lack of them. Where eyes, noses, and mouths should have been, there was nothing but smooth, featureless voids. It was like looking at mannequins left to rot in the woods. I don't remember running. I don't remember hearing anything either. No footsteps, no rustling leaves. Just the suffocating silence as I stumbled back to my house, locking the door behind me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing their hollow faces in my mind, the way they seemed to tilt their heads toward me, as though they could see me without eyes. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a prank or some bizarre art installation. But deep down, I knew better. The next morning, I woke up to find muddy footprints on my porch. They weren't shoe prints, they were bare, long, and twisted, like skeletal feet had been pacing outside my door all night. That was when the dreams started. In them, I was always back in the woods, wandering deeper and deeper until I stumbled across those hollow things again. Only now, they were closer, and they spoke, not with voices, but by pressing their faceless heads against mine. Their thoughts weren't words, they were sensations, overwhelming and unbearable. Hunger, emptiness, the black hole of their existence, trying to consume mine. When I woke up, I could still feel them. Their presence clung to me like cobwebs, whispering in the back of my mind. The days blurred together after that. I started losing time, hours disappearing like the woods had reached into my life and plucked them away. And then things began to change. The first thing I noticed was the photo on my mantle. It was of me and my brother at the beach, taken years ago. Only, in this version, my brother wasn't there. The space beside me in the photo was empty, as though he'd never existed. I called him that night, desperate to hear his voice and prove I wasn't losing my mind, but the number was disconnected. When I asked my mother about him, she looked at me with a blank expression and said, "What brother?" The hollow ones, because that's what I started calling them, were eating pieces of my life. Memories, people, moments severing was being devoured bit by bit, leaving me hollow in their wake. Every time I tried to hold on to something, a picture, a date, and name it, would slip through my fingers like sand. The more I fought, the more they took. One day, I woke up in a house I didn't recognize. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse, and the windows covered in grime. I barely recognized myself in the cracked bathroom mirror. My reflection was thin, pale, and gaunt, with dark hollows under my eyes. I wasn't just losing memories anymore, I was losing myself, ... But the worst part, the hollow ones weren't just in the woods anymore, they were in my house. I'd catch glimpses of them out of the corner of my eye, standing motionless in the shadows. I'd hear soft, shuffling footsteps when I was alone, or see a hand thin and skeletal slip out of sight when I turned my head. They were everywhere, watching, waiting. One night, they spoke to me again, not in my dreams, but in the waking world. Their whispers crawled under my skin like worms, their thoughts hammering into my mind. "You're not real," they said. "You are the hollow one. I don't know how much longer I have. Every day, I feel myself fading a little more. My reflection is almost gone now, just a faint outline on the glass. Soon, there won't be anything left of me at all. If you're reading this, I have one piece of advice. Stay out of the woods. And if you ever see them, those pale, hollow things, don't look too long. Don't let them see you. Because once they do, they'll never stop. And eventually, You'll forget who you were. You'll forget you were ever anything at all. Story 3. The Watcher. 3 years ago, I came across a strange job ad. It wasn't flashy or detailed, just a short, cryptic message. Job available. Good pay. No benefits. Discretion required. It listed only an email address. At the time, I was working as a manager at a music store, but rumors of layoffs were circling like vultures, and I knew it was only a matter of time before I'd be out of work. I was desperate enough to give it a shot. So I sent an email. Within half an hour, I got a response. It told me to show up at an office building in the upscale part of the city for a screening. The instructions were precise, almost clinical, and something about them unsettled me. But desperation will dull your sense of caution. When I arrived, the office was cold and sterile, filled with the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. After a short wait, I was led into a plain room where I was handed a stack of forms and questionnaires. They collected them without a word and told me they'd be in touch. Weeks passed, and I'd almost forgotten about it when I got another email. I'd moved on to the second stage. This time, the address led me to a different office building, far from the first. There, I met a man named Mr. Solomon. He was polite, but something about him felt off. His movements were too calculated, his smile too sharp. He walked me into a room that looked like a mock setup for my potential workspace. A small, sterile space with a desk, 2 monitors, and a bolted-down box with 2 oversized buttons, one red, one green. Solomon explained the job. I'd watch a live video feed on the left monitor and log any noteworthy events on the right. The red button was for emergencies. The green button was for events of significance. I was to change into a provided uniform, leave all personal belongings in a locker, and never bring anything into or out of the surveillance room. No pens, no paper, nothing. The pay was astronomical, $35 an hour for a 6-hour shift, 7 days a week. It seemed too good to be true, and yet, I took the job. The room. The surveillance room was exactly like the mock-up, down to the last detail. I entered through a locker room, left my phone and wallet in a metal cubby, and changed into a drab grey uniform. Inside, the left monitor showed a live feed of a room as strange. Windowless space furnished with a bed, a sofa, a television, and various pieces of furniture. At first, I focused on the job, logging uneventful hours and ignoring the gnawing sense that something was off. The feed showed a woman. She was young, maybe in her late 20s, with soft features and long dark hair. I began to call her Rachel in my head. She spent her days reading, watching TV, or painting. I convinced myself she was part of some experiment. After all, the room was clean and well furnished. She didn't appear harmed, and the company insisted everything was above board. But then the others started appearing. The visitors. 2 or 3 times a week, figures in strange, black uniforms would enter the room. Their faces were obscured by smooth, featureless masks, and they moved with an unnerving precision. They would take Rachel from the room, sometimes dragging her as she struggled, but often leading her quietly, head hung low. They always brought her back, but each time she seemed a little dimmer. Her once vibrant movements became slower, more mechanical. I wanted to hit the red button. I wanted to call the police, but fear kept me rooted. Solomon's warnings about discretion echoed in my mind. And besides, she didn't look hurt, not physically. Still, something gnawed at me. ... The paintings. Rachel painted almost every day. At first it seemed innocent enough scenes of serene forests, quiet lakes, and lone buildings. But over time, her work became darker. The colors turned murky, and the subjects more ominous. A shadowy figure lurking in the trees. A faceless man standing in a doorway. Then one day, she started arranging the paintings on the sofa. 4 of them, placed carefully in a row. For the first time, I could see them clearly. The first painting showed a dense forest, dark and foreboding. The second was a crumbling stone well. The third depicted a small, isolated house. And the fourth was this room. The hair on my arms stood on end. I leaned closer, my eyes scanning the details. That's when I saw the words. Hidden in the swirling brushstrokes, almost imperceptible, were faint letters. Please, help me. Thomas. My heart thundered in my chest. My name, the descent. The following weeks blurred into a fever dream of paranoia and fear. The paintings became more frantic, the colors smeared and chaotic. Rachel no longer watched TV or read. She painted obsessively, her hands shaking as she worked. One night, she stopped mid-painting and turned directly toward the camera. Her eyes bore into me, filled with terror and pleading. She mouthed the words, "Help me." I hit the red button. Nothing happened. Frantic, I hit it again and again. The light above it blinked, but no one came. I screamed into the empty room, begging for someone to tell me what was going on. That's when the feed cut out. The monitor went black, and for the first time in months, I was left alone in silence. The visitors return. When the feed returned the next day, Rachel was gone. The room was empty, the paintings removed. I stared at the blank walls, dread coiling in my gut. Hours passed, and still, nothing. Finally, the door to her room opened. The masked figures entered, dragging someone behind them. It was me, ... I stumbled back, knocking over my chair. On the screen, the other version of me was limp, unconscious, as they laid him in the bed. The camera panned suddenly, tilting upward to focus on the corner of the room. For the first time, I realized it wasn't a camera. It was an eye. A cold, wet, pulsating eye embedded in the wall, staring directly at me, ... The screen went black again, and the room around me plunged into darkness. I turned, searching for the door, but it was gone. I wasn't in the surveillance room anymore. I was in Rachel's room, and I wasn't alone. The watcher watches. I don't know how long I've been here. Days, months, years. Time slips away in this place. The eye in the corner watches me constantly, its unblinking stare piercing through my soul. I paint now. Every day, I paint. Forests, wells, houses, and a room just like this one. Somewhere out there, someone is watching me. I wonder if they'll see the words I've hidden in my work. I wonder if they'll help. But deep down, I know the truth. No one's coming. No one ever comes. Story 4. The note in flat 42. Moving in with Jamie was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life. After 5 years together, we were finally taking the leap our own place, our own life. Sure, it wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. A 2-bedroom apartment on the 7th floor of an old tower block. The area wasn't great, but the view of the park and the affordable rent made it feel like a palace to us. The first night felt like a dream. We unpacked just enough to collapse on a mattress on the floor and shared a few cigarettes on the balcony, staring out at the twinkling city lights. Jamie kissed my forehead before we fell asleep, whispering, "This is it, love, the start of everything." That was yesterday. This morning, I found the note, ... The note. Jamie had already left for his early shift, and I was sipping coffee, trying to shake off the grogginess of moving day. I decided to explore the flat a bit more, opening cupboards and drawers to see what the previous tenant might have left behind. That's when I found it, a folded piece of paper tucked among spare keys and smoke alarm batteries. On the outside, written in elegant cursive, were the words, "To the new occupant of flat 42. Curious, I unfolded the note and began to read. "Dear new occupier, welcome to your new home. I lived here for 35 years with my husband, Bernie. Unfortunately, Bernie passed away here not long ago in an incident I'd rather not discuss. My sister insisted I move in with her after that. Leaving this place is bittersweet, but I want to share some advice, things you need to know to stay safe. This building has quirks. 1. Never use the lift between 1:11 a.m. and 3:33 a.m. Trust me, just don't. It's not worth the risk. 2. When you hear strange noises from flat 48, ignore them. Mr. Prentice is harmless, but you don't want to investigate the sounds. 3. If a window cleaner knocks on your balcony door, do not engage. He will try to get your attention, but don't acknowledge him. He'll leave eventually. 4. Don't leave food scraps out. The things that come for them, they're not pests. 5. If someone claims to live in flats 65 to 72, shut and lock your door. Those flats have been empty since the fire in 1987. 6. Keep a weapon in every room. Sometimes things slip through the cracks. You'll be glad you have it. 7. The damp patch in the bedroom ceiling can't be fixed. Sometimes it turns red. Don't panic, it doesn't drip or spread. Just ignore it. I know this all sounds bizarre. I felt the same when I moved in, but trust me, this flat can be wonderful. You just have to follow the rules. Good luck, Mrs. Prudence Hemmings. The unfolding horror. I laughed nervously, folding the note and setting it on the counter. Surely, it was some elaborate prank, right? But as I glanced around the flat, I couldn't shake the unease settling in my chest. The damp patch was already there above the bed. It wasn't red, but it looked like it might have been at some point. And as I stood there, trying to convince myself it was all nonsense, I saw a hairless cat slinking through the hallway outside. The window cleaner. At 11:15 a.m., a knock startled me. It wasn't the front door. It was the balcony. A man stood there, dressed in overalls and holding a bucket and squeegee. He waved cheerfully, his face stretched into a too-wide grin. I froze. Mrs. Hemmings' warning echoed in my head. Don't engage. The man knocked again, harder this time, his grin never faltering. Excuse me, miss, lovely day, isn't it? Mind if I clean these windows? I stepped back, heart pounding. He couldn't get in. The door was locked. The knocking continued, growing more insistent. Then he pressed his face against the glass, staring directly at me, ... Just a cup of tea, love, he called. A little something for the effort. His voice was pleasant, almost musical, but there was something wrong with it, something hollow. I ran to the bedroom and hid, pressing myself into the corner. The knocking continued for 30 agonizing minutes before it finally stopped. When I crept back to check, he was gone. The windows sparkled, spotless. Jamie's disappearance. Jamie's shift was supposed to end at noon. By 2 p.m., he still wasn't home. I called his work, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. His manager's words sent a chill through me. Jamie never showed up this morning. That couldn't be right. I'd kissed him goodbye at 3:15 a.m. as he left for work, and then it hit me, ... The lift, the night. It's 1:30 a.m. now. Jamie still hasn't come home. I've called him 100 times, but his phone goes straight to voicemail. The flat feels wrong. The shadows are too deep, the air too still. I swear I can hear faint tapping on the balcony door, even though no one's there. The damp patch on the ceiling has started to darken. It looks like it's bleeding. I keep hearing noises from the hallway, soft whispers, and the scuff of footsteps. Once, I thought I saw someone standing outside the peephole, but when I checked, no one was there. I've locked every door, every window. I've armed myself with the heaviest kitchen knife I could find, but I know it won't be enough. Because at exactly 3 a.m., the lift hummed to life. It shouldn't be moving. No one else lives on this floor, but I can hear it rattling and groaning as it ascends. And now it stopped, right outside my door, ... The final rule. I'm writing this in the hope that someone will find it. If you do, please don't move into flat 42. The lift doors are opening, and I can hear someone knocking. Story 5. It's official. I'm an old man. For years I've clung to the notion that I was in my early 70s. But numbers don't lie. Today, I am 75. It's not a milestone to celebrate. Life has become a slow, grinding weight, bones that creak with every movement, a house that echoes with silence, and a bed that's been cold and empty for 8 months. Once I cast my vote this November, I might have nothing left to live for at all. But I didn't come here for sympathy. No happy birthdays or empty words. Thank you. I've come to tell a story, one I've never shared before. Not with my children, not with my wife, not even with myself, if I'm honest. I buried it deep, convincing myself that it was childish nonsense, a figment of my overactive imagination. But as the years pass, it gets harder to lie to yourself, especially when the scent comes back. That sickly sweet mixture of citrus and pine. It's here again, and I can't ignore it anymore. I need to tell someone before it's too late. It was the summer of 1950. I was 9 years old, and it was shaping up to be the loneliest summer of my life. My best friend had moved away, and my mother, God rest her soul, was too busy barking orders to notice the quiet boy slipping out the door each day. I ended up at the library. Not because I loved books, mind you, but because it was quiet. No chores, no nagging, no kids to remind me of how alone I felt. I spent my days wandering the dusty aisles, pretending to read while annoying the elderly patrons with the click of my tongue. The days dragged on, grey and uneventful, until the day I found the door. It was tucked away in the far corner of the library, hidden behind a shelf of foreign language books. A small wooden door, weathered and ancient, with a black metal knob engraved with a single footprint. I shouldn't have opened it. Even at 9 years old, I knew better. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then turned the knob and slipped inside. The first thing I noticed was the darkness, thick and oppressive, like it was alive. I fumbled forward, my hands searching for something, anything to guide me. My fingers brushed against a string hanging from above. I pulled it, and a single bare bulb flickered to life, casting weak yellow light over my surroundings. I was standing on a wooden platform, surrounded by shadows. To my left was a spiral staircase, old and rickety, spiraling downward into blackness. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to turn back, to let the door close behind me and pretend I'd never seen it. But that was the thing about being 9 years old. You could feel fear, but you didn't yet understand consequence. I stepped onto the staircase. The wood creaked beneath my weight, the sound echoing in the silence. I gripped the railing, rough with splinters, and descended into the void. The light from the bulb above faded with every step, until it was nothing more than a faint pin. And then I saw it. A massive red door loomed before me, its surface cracked and weathered like old leather. Light seeped from its edges, bathing the cement floor in an eerie glow. My heart pounded as I reached for the handle. It was warm to the touch, almost alive. I opened the door. The room beyond was a library, but not like the one above. It was smaller, cozier, with shelves packed full of books in vibrant colors. In the center of the room were 2 armchairs, plush and inviting, facing each other across a small wooden table. And the smell, it was intoxicating. A blend of citrus and pine that filled my lungs and made me feel lightheaded. I wandered between the shelves, running my fingers along the spines of books I'd never seen before. They were perfect, bright, unblemished, and inviting. I sat down in the purple armchair. The other chair, the green one, remained empty. I should have felt peace, but instead I felt watched. One spent years visiting that library. It became my sanctuary. Whenever life at home felt unbearable, I'd slip through the door and lose myself in the pages of stories. But on my 12th birthday, the sanctuary turned sour. I was reading late, long after the library had closed, when I noticed the smell had changed. The sweet citrusy aroma was still there, but now it was tinged with something else, something rotten. The scent seemed to come from a particular shelf at the back of the room. As I approached, my eyes were drawn to a single book. Its cover was maroon leather, and at the top of the spine was the same black footprint as the knob on the door. I pulled it from the shelf and opened it. The first page contained a single sentence, written in red ink. "Rest your sorrows down, friend, and leave them where they lie." I flipped to the next page, blank, and the next blank again. As I neared the armchairs, I turned one last page and froze. My name was written there, in the same red ink. I dropped the book and looked up. The empty green armchair was no longer empty. A man sat there, his suit immaculate and his hair as white as snow. He smiled at me, his teeth too sharp, his eyes too bright. "Hello, friend," he said, his voice smooth and oily. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. "I've been waiting for you," he continued. "Tonight, your world will shatter. But I can help you, if you'll let me." He told me things, horrible things. He told me that my mother would be dead by morning, that my life would be filled with suffering and loss. But he could make it better. He could make it all go away. All I had to do was say yes. I ran. I didn't stop until I was out of the library, out of the town, back in my own bed. When I woke up the next morning, the house was silent. The kitchen smelled of citrus and pine, and my mother was lying on the floor in a pool of her own blood. That was 63 years ago. I smell it now, that same scent. It lingers in the corners of my home, wafting through the halls, stronger with each passing day. The door is back, and this time I'm going to open it. I'm tired of running. And that's the end of tonight's 5 spine-chilling stories. If these tales left you feeling unsettled, or made you turn on an extra light, don't forget to subscribe to Panda's Nightmares for more haunting and terrifying stories. Hit the like button, follow for updates, and be sure to check out my other videos for even more spooky content. Before you go, if you can, please consider supporting my dad's medical treatment through the GoFundMe link in the description. Your kindness and generosity mean the world to me. ... Thank you for watching, and remember, the scariest stories are the ones that make you question what's real. Stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.